Today we're going to talk about blueprint for an inspired life. You ready for the blueprint?
Yes.
The blueprint. All right. In this series, we've been talking about how before we came onto the planet, we were part of this spirit, aware of our oneness. This is Wayne Dyer's, what he's talking about in this book, that in the beginning, before we came on this planet, we were aware of our oneness with spirit. That's what we were aware of. And then we became a particle, and then a fetus, and then an infant, and then an adult. And we got conditioned by all the different forces, and we got caught in the ego, and we lost sight of who we really are as a spiritual being and of that reality. So living an inspired life is remembering once again who we are as a spiritual being, right? Remembering. There's a Sanskrit word called smriti, which is remembering. Remembering. Meditation is remembering. Prayer is remembering. Thinking thoughts that help you to remember. That's to be in spirit, right? Inspired. Living an inspired life. So today we're going to look at some key components, and I'm glad you're joining me now for these key components. I find them fascinating. In fact, I just love this chapter in the book. It contains some ideas that Dr. Dyer has been talking about. He talked about for much of his life, I believe. So if you're a Wayne Dyer fan, you may remember some of these ideas, and they're great reminders if you've heard them before. So I'm going to share with you 6 ideas, the blueprint. And the first idea is to be independent of the good opinion of others. Dr. Dyer calls these principles. Be independent of the good opinion of others. Now, where did Dr. Dyer get that from initially? Abraham Maslow. Dr. Abraham Maslow, who was one of the first psychologists around the 60s, where he and a few others, significant psychologists, started to study how do healthy people think, how do healthy people behave. Because up to that point, psychology was about studying the people who were sick. Sigmund Freud was studying people who were sick emotionally and psychologically. And Abraham Maslow and some others came along and said, why are we just studying sick people? Why don't we study what healthy people are doing? What he later called self-actualizing people. How are they living? How are they thinking? How are they being? Let's study them and learn from them. That was a new idea, right? And that was the beginning of what they called humanistic psychology. So Dr. Dyer was greatly influenced by Abraham Maslow. In fact, he was so much influenced by Abraham Maslow that he feels like Abraham Maslow was giving the baton to him to carry on. When Dr. Dyer graduated with a doctorate in psychology, Abraham Maslow died on that very same day. And Wayne Dyer felt like the baton was being given to him to carry on this understanding of what is self-actualization? What does it mean to be fully human? What does it mean to be fully who you are here to be? And one of the ideas he got from Maslow is be independent of the good opinion of others, which he lived in his life as well. What does that mean? It means following your inspiration even when there are going to be people who do not approve. Following your inspiration even when there are going to be people who are going to be disappointed. Following your inspiration even when there are going to be people who disagree with you. How many of you have done something that was different, unexpected, and people didn't understand what you were doing. How many of you had that experience, right? And maybe you stopped at that point. Maybe you said, oh, I don't know, maybe not. Maybe I'm going the wrong way. Maybe somebody talked you out of it. You let them talk you out of it. Or maybe you stayed the course. Maybe you stayed the course. And the point is expressed through Shakespeare's Hamlet. To be or not to be. What's the rest of it? That is the question. And that is the question. Who are you here to serve? There's a scripture verse. Who are you here to serve? Are you here to serve God? Are you here to serve the material world? Are you here to serve something else? As for me and my house, I will serve the Lord. Remember that scripture? Yes. I will serve the Lord. When you serve the Lord, you're serving the Lord of your being. You're serving your higher self, right? Your higher self is guiding you to do certain things. Your inspiration is guiding you to do certain things. Who are you going to serve? Are you going to serve other people who don't like it? Are you going to serve other people who disagree? Are you going to serve other people who don't approve? Or are you serving the Lord of your being? That's the question. Because if we don't follow that, if we don't follow our inspiration, something's going to be nagging inside of us, right? Something's not going to feel right. I've read stories. Doreen Virtue, before she became a fundamentalist Christian, back in the days when she wrote inspirational books, she wrote about a couple of men who spent their whole lives ignoring their inspiration and came to the end of their lives still feeling like they have to follow that calling. So are we going to do that for ourselves and put off our inspiration? No. No. What did you say? No. Hey, I like that. No. No, because it'll eat at us if we don't. If we don't. And we will experience, as Hamlet says, he says, to be or not to be, that is the question, and goes on to say, whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, or to take arms against a sea of troubles, and by opposing end them. We don't listen to that inner guidance, and we let other people talk us out of it, or we let other people's approval stop us, then there will be, those are the slings and arrows that we face. So listening to what is your inner calling? What are you committed to do? What are you dedicated to? Now that doesn't mean we're going to do something that ticks everybody off. It doesn't mean that we do it with anger. It doesn't mean that we do it in a negative way. We do it from love because that's our true nature, right? We follow out of a sense of love. Some people are rebellious. They do it out of, well, if you're not going to stop me, you're not going to show me, right? Anybody know anybody like that? Oh, yeah. Anybody know any intimately like that? Right? You're not going to stop me. I'm going to show you. No, we don't need to do that. But we follow our inspiration, being independent of the good opinion of others. You know why? Because ultimately you have to live with you. Right? Our experience of life is based on what's going on inside of us. And if there's a nagging calling inside of us that we're not listening to, guess who that affects? Us. Us. You have to live with yourself. And nobody knows what is right for you except you. And that's a scary thought for some people. Nobody knows what's right for you except you. And I'm going to tell you what, a psychic doesn't know what's right for you. A spiritual medium doesn't know what's right for you. Nobody knows what's right for you except you. Now maybe the psychic or someone might affirm something, but ultimately it's got to be felt within yourself. I've consulted psychics in the past, and it always confused me. I don't think it helped me very much. Because ultimately, the buck stops here, doesn't it? You got to know within yourself. You got to feel right within yourself about, do I feel right about this path I'm on? Do I feel like I'm following my guidance? Do I feel a sense of joy? Do I feel a sense of peace? We're going to talk more about that next week. But this first principle, be independent of the good opinion of others. And principle number 2 leads from the first principle. And one thing you can do, as Dyer suggests, you can write a statement reminding you to be independent of the good opinion of others, to listen to your own thoughts, to listen to your own feelings. Doesn't mean you don't listen to what other people say. It doesn't mean we don't listen to other people's opinions, other people's perspectives. But ultimately, the buck stops within us, doesn't it? You have to make your own decisions. You have to live your own life. You came in alone and you go out alone. When you're going out, when you're leaving the planet, Paula, when you're leaving the planet, anyone, it's you going out alone. Right? Ain't nobody going with you. It's nice to tell somebody who's dying, a piece of me goes with you. And heaven knows, don't take anybody with you either. Right? Nobody's going out with you. Right? You're going out by yourself. So how do you feel when you're making that transition? Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, if I could just say her middle name, let me try again. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who studied death and dying, was a pioneer in it. She said the people who cry the loudest on their deathbeds are not the ones who cry about the mistakes they've made, but the ones who regret the things they didn't do. You get that? It's not the people, they don't regret what they did. It's the things they didn't do. The ones that cry the loudest. Oh, why didn't I? I talk to people too. I've talked to people. In fact, we're going to get to that too in one of our principles. Let me get ahead of myself. So be willing to accept, this is principle number 2, be willing to accept the disapproval of others. Be willing to accept the disapproval of others. This is something that Dr. Dyer said throughout his career that I'm aware of. And on page 70, he says, this is an interesting statement. The people who receive the most approval in life are the ones who care the least about it. So technically, if we want the approval of others, we need to stop caring about it and turn our attention to becoming an inspired being of sharing. Amen to that? Amen. Yeah. So people are going to, and he talks about this. He says it's not being negative or cynical to say that people are going to disapprove. When you start listening to your inner inspiration, what you're called to do, what you're guided to do, there are going to be people who disapprove. How many of you know that from experience? I'm going to Unity. What is Unity? What is that? Right? That's not what we're not Unity. Why are you going to why that career? Why are you dating that person? Why are you going out with her, him, them? You know, there's always going to be disapproval. And as he points out, once you get past that initial disapproval, it'll pass. It'll pass. I was raised Jewish, right? I went to Hebrew school the first 6 years of my life. From 8 in the morning till 3 o'clock in the afternoon, we were stuck in Hebrew school. And I was bar mitzvahed in an Orthodox temple. We were part of, there's tribes in Israel, we were part of the Kohen tribe, the priestly tribe. My dad would get called up to the altar during the service, even though he was not Orthodox in his behavior. he would get called up and he would get to read from the Torah. We were from the Kohen tribe. And yet, my mother got interested in integral yoga in the 70s, specifically the teachings of Swami Satchidananda. And I picked up one of her books when I was going through a hard time in college. Even in high school, did a report on something Satchidananda said. I was so fascinated by it. But then in college, I needed it. I was lost. And eventually, I found unity. Someone said, hey, I think you'll like unity. The stuff you're reading and studying, you'll like unity. So I ended up going to Unity Church, and I liked it. And it was at a time in life where I had to choose a career. I was in college, and yeah, everybody's choosing careers. All I was interested in is knowing what is the truth. What is life all about anyway? That's all I was interested in. And so I decided I was going to become a unity minister. How do you think my Jewish parents felt about that? My mom said, why Jesus? The yogi mother, why Jesus? She didn't really get it. And my dad, who was a lawyer, he said, I'll send you to law school, I'll pay for it. You can take over my firm. Why don't you go talk to the rabbi, Rabbi Furman? I didn't talk to the rabbi. Law bored me. I wanted to know truth. I wanted to know what is the truth about life. I wanted to know, what am I here for? What is the purpose of life? And I followed it. My stepfather, the barber, he didn't know what the heck I was doing. You know, he had a judge who would come for haircuts. The judge was the father of one of my best friends. And the judge told my stepfather, when he heard I was going to be a minister, Justin is wasting his mind. It's a good mind wasted. That's what I got. But I had to follow. I had to do what was mine to do. And I became an ordained unity minister. I was one of the youngest in the history of unity to become an ordained minister at the age of 26. And then after that, I became aware of Yogananda's teachings. And I wanted to know more about that. So even though I was working in a traditional unity church where the minister wore a blue robe, and I was an ordained unity minister, and I worked with her for a year, and she wanted me to be the minister of her church eventually. Big church, seated 1,000 people. I said, no, I've got to go to Northern California and study the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda and deepen my understanding of the teachings. I thought my career as a unity minister might be over at that point. Now, here's the thing. As Dyer points out, when you follow your inspiration and people disapprove, they will come around in the end, most likely. Their disapproval will turn to respect. You see, it goes back to that statement about not needing other people's approval. Eventually, they will respect your choices. How many of you had that experience? Yep. You went up against the disapproval, the slings and arrows, and as time went on, wow, they respected you for it. Yeah. So I was living in Northern California in the foothills of Nevada City. Actually had moved to Sacramento, but was still involved with the spiritual community and was developing a speaking circuit. And I got a call from Eric and Olga Butterworth, asking if I would like to come to Manhattan and work with him. And I said, well, let me think about it. And so I came to Manhattan, and I was working with Eric Butterworth, a metaphysical icon who I admired and studied for many years prior to that. And guess what? My mom and my stepfather would listen to my talks every week. My dad came to Lincoln Center. Some of you met my father, you met my mother, you met my stepfather. They all came to Lincoln Center to participate in the services. My brothers, my sisters, they all understood and embraced. And now, 30 years later, New Thought metaphysics, meditation, yoga, it's in mainstream now. 30 years later, right? That's how people are. You have to follow your inspiration because people will not get it. They won't understand it. But you'll feel good about what you're doing. And I have loved every single moment of it. The entire journey. I have not had a bored day in 30 plus years because of this journey. Following your inspiration. Following your inspiration. Be independent of the good opinion of others. Be willing to accept the disapproval of others. Principle number 3, stay detached from outcomes. Stay detached from outcomes. This is another very interesting point from Wayne Dyer. I'm going to have to do some talks just on these principles here in the new, instead of giving you 6 in one day, because there's so much in each of these principles. Stay detached from the outcome. Now, I find essentially what Dr. Dyer says in this point is live in the now. Enjoy the now. How many of you knew him to talk about that? I once asked him in person at one of his talks when I was living in Sacramento. I asked him about living in the now, to tell me more about that and goals. I asked him about goals and living in the now. How does that? He said it's like dancing. It's like dancing. When you're dancing, you're not trying to get somewhere. You're enjoying every moment of it. You're enjoying the movement. You're not, oh, let's get to the other end of the floor. See that place over there? We want to get there. You know, okay, let's get over there. No, it's the enjoyment of the moment, right? And he's a little, in my perspective, he's a little hard to understand in this point. And I've been studying his ideas on this for 30 years, actually. And I don't think he's entirely clear on this point because he talks about having, vision. So he said, even though I have a vision of the end result of my book, I'm writing right now and just enjoying the writing. I'm living in the joy. I'm living in the flow of the writing. I'm entirely enjoying the writing of the book. And I know and trust that God will handle the details, even though the book is, it'll take several months. God's going to handle the details of how it all unfolds. But you see, he says you don't need goals. You don't need goals because goals cause you to strive and you never arrive. You're always striving and never arriving instead of enjoying the present moment, which is all you ever have. The future is just a present moment. When it gets here, it's the now. Right now is the now. A moment ago is over. The future is not yet. When the future gets here, it's a now. So why are you spending your present moment striving for something that's going to be the now at some point? The thing is, he does have a vision of what he's trying to accomplish, which is a book, right? Wasn't that kind of like a goal? To me, it's kind of like having a goal. You want to be healthy, that's kind of like a goal. His publishers had deadlines for his books. And according to the Hay House president, who I heard personally say, Dr. Dyer is always on time with his books. So he had a deadline and he had a book. In fact, he would create the cover of the book before he wrote the book. So it gave him a positive image to move in the direction of. So how do you tie this up? How do you work this together? Here's how I do it. There's nothing wrong with having a goal. Enjoy the moments along the way. Now, the jury is still out on this. I'm still working with this whole idea myself. Because I've worked with goals, I've worked with not having goals, and for me, it's trying to find that balance, right? Because there are people like Eckhart Tolle, who's like, just live in the now, right? I once asked the great Brian Tracy, the great personal trainer and author of many books on personal development and business, I asked him about, well, what about living in the now? Eckhart Tolle talks about living in the now. He said Eckhart Tolle lives a very simple life. It's easy for him to talk about living in the now. So bottom line, you got to find what works for you. I love the idea of living in the now, and I'm working in my own life to have goals that I want, but not to think that, that's the point of life is not the goal. The goal's not going to make you happy. However, having a goal can help enliven your present moment. The late Eric Butterworth said something that was very meaningful to me. He said, goals are not a preoccupation for tomorrow, but a direction for today. So that's how the two come together for me. Having a goal is a wonderful thing to give direction, to help prioritize my day, help prioritize the week and whatnot. But the moment, the now, is all there ever really is. Enjoying the now. Make sense?
Yes.
How many of you make sense to?
It's like the marathon.
It's like a marathon?
Right, because you have the goal of 26.2.
You have the goal of 26.2. Yeah.
So you have to enjoy every mile.
Enjoy every mile. Well, that's a great analogy, right? How many people out there are enjoying every mile? I'm not even enjoying thinking about 26, but ideally, absolutely. In fact, there was a saying of I believe it was the Kenya running team that said, you want to run so that you enjoy every bit of it so that you will enjoy tomorrow also, running. And I think really isn't life, if we're not enjoying life, what's the point? Oh, but I can brag about I ran 26.2 miles. I did the New York City Marathon. Oh, that's wonderful, awesome, awesome. So you get some pride, you get some, I did it, you put it on your shelf and whatnot, and you say, look what I did. Okay, there's that. There's that. But what about enjoying the whole thing? Why does it have to be so painful? Training or running or whatever you're doing. Now your present moment's full of that. So anyway, I love the ideal of living the present moment fully and also having a direction that you're moving in. It seems that he did, right? So, principle, that's a whole talk in itself, isn't it? Principle number 3. Principle number 4, know that we need nothing, no things to be inspired. You need no things to be inspired. I'm not going to spend a lot on that. I don't think you need to hear a lot about that. No stuff's going to make you inspired. Maybe I feel more I could say on that topic, actually. It starts coming up. But, psychology's proven that you adapt to stuff, right? You adapt to stuff. You get a new outfit. It feels, you love it. New pair of shoes, new car, new outfit, new whatever. and you adapt to it. Don't you? Have you experienced that before? That new purse or that new shoes or whatever, that was, oh, look at this. You know, I look at this. And it feels good. Feels good. And then 2 months later, I need something else. It's old. It's old. Stuff, his whole point here is things aren't going to make you inspired. Inspiration is an inside job, right? You can have things. Things will come into your life. Nothing wrong with having things. But what I like the idea is enjoying things, enjoying life from the joy within you. That's what the great masters do. They're filled up with joy. They don't need anything, but they still enjoy stuff with the joy of their being. Make sense? If you're filled up with love and joy, then you can have relationships, you can be involved in the world, you can have stuff, you can do all kinds of stuff and enjoy it more because you don't need it to be happy. And if it gets scratched, if it gets lost, if something happens to the stuff, you're not devastated by it because it's just stuff. It's just, I remember my stepfather, Henry, he was a barber, 60 years. He'd go to work early in the morning, come back late in the evening, standing on his feet all day long. I think it was like $7 a haircut back in the 70s or so. Can you imagine? Or less than that probably. I don't remember. But he bought me a beach cruiser bike, a dirt bike, when I was like 10 years old. That dirt bike had to have been $100, which for him, that must have been a lot of money, especially back then. And I, naive kid and naive adult for years, I drove that bike and I left it outside of a People's drugstore, went inside, bought something, came out, and it was gone. Somebody said, yeah, there was a group of guys who walked out with your bike. I saw a group of guys left with your bike. My bike was stolen. You know what my stepfather said to me? It's just a thing, Justin. It's just a thing. You know, he bought me another dirt bike, an even better one. Isn't that sweet? Talk about generosity, right? That's generosity. That's why I loved him with all my heart, because he was just generous like that. So things won't do it for you. Principle number 5, don't die wondering. Don't die wondering. What does that mean? Don't have regrets. We all have some regrets, but they're in the past. Forgive yourself. Now is all that we really have, right? The regrets are in the past, and as much as possible, if the pain from the past comes up, you got to let it go. You got to allow it to flow through you. You got to relax and let it flow through you and get your mind back into the present moment, because the past is over. You know, we learn from it. We grow from it. We're not supposed to suffer from it. And it's not happening now, right? It's not happening now. I talked to some very accomplished person not long ago who told me about a regret that he had from his past. Dr. Dyer talks about a regret he had about a woman he had a crush on in high school. And he just was in love with this woman. And he would call her, he'd pick up the phone, and then he'd hang up. He was afraid of rejection. And 30 years later, he was at a high school reunion dancing with this woman, or talking to her, I forget what he said. And he shared with her that he had been, what had happened, that he had dialed her up. And she said, well, Wayne, I had always been attracted to you. And I had left you clues to call me, but you never did. You never did. Us dumb men. Duh. He never did, and he regretted it. I met another person, accomplished person, who knew a woman when he was young, and the father was against him marrying this woman, so he didn't do it. Regretted it. Regrets are in the past. But the point is, let's not create more regrets. Right? Let's not create more regrets. Back to the Kubler-Ross story. The people who cry the loudest, scream the loudest on their deathbed, they don't cry because of their mistakes. They cry because of their regrets. What they didn't do, they wish they had done. So forgive yourself, forgive myself for regrets of the past. Come into the now, and now don't regret now. Don't die wondering, what could have happened? What could my life have been? What if I had done that? Right? What is it that you want to do in your life? Let's bring it back there. What are you inspired to do? What are you being called to do? And are you concerned about what people think? Are you concerned about not having their approval? Are you afraid to take a chance? Are you afraid and are you at risk of dying wondering? His point here is don't die wondering. Do it. Take a chance. The late Dr. Norman Vincent Peale used to say, I'd rather try something great and fail than do nothing and succeed. I'd rather try something great and fail than do nothing and succeed. That's a great idea, isn't it? I'd rather try something great and fail than do nothing and succeed. What is it you want to do? What is your inspiration? Take a small step. Take a small step. Take a small step and get the motivation going. Get the flow going. Take a small step. What is one step you can take today? What is one small step you can take today for that thing that you want to do? That thing that you don't want to die wondering about. What is a small step you could take today? Principle number 6, remember that our desires won't arrive by our schedule. I know I'm going long today, but they don't have the timer up on my screen today, so I'm going to blame them in the back. Just kidding. It's the last point. Remember that our desires won't arrive by our schedule. Whose schedule are they going to arrive on? Life's schedule. God's schedule. Spirit's schedule. One of the main points of this book that Dyer makes over and over, and I love it, is that God is always working through you and in your life. We said it in the first message about Arthur Miller, where he's being interviewed, the playwright, are you writing a play? And he said, I'm not sure. I think I am. Well, I probably am. The trusting that God is working in your life. And if God is working in your life, then things are going to come to you at the right and perfect time. That's Dr. Dyer's message. In fact, he has a great affirmation in there. I shared it with you a couple of talks ago, which is that whatever I need is on its way. And it's going to be better than what I imagine. What I need is on its way, and it's going to be even more than I can imagine. Know that for yourself. Whatever I need is on its way. Whatever I need is on its way. Join me in saying that together. Whatever I need is on its way. Again, whatever I need is on its way. That's a mindset, isn't it? That's a shift in thought. That's a shift in thought. And then enjoying the present moments, following your inspiration, being independent of the good opinion of others, what freedom is in that. The people who get the most approval are the ones who don't need it. That doesn't mean you go around and tick people off. That doesn't mean you go around and act rude to people. No, but it means you try to follow your inner guidance best that you can, your inspiration. And trusting the divine order is at work in your life. Your divine order is working in your life. And I'm going to close with this other great quote that from Dr. Dyer. Was so nice to see it in his words. This is a quote directly from him that I hope I can find. Otherwise, you just hang in with me and I'll read through the whole book and try to find this. Here it is. This is right from the voice of Dr. Dyer. This goes back to principle number 3. Since there's only now, learning to live in it and enjoy every present moment is the same as being in spirit. While being focused on an outcome to determine our level of happiness and success keeps us out of spirit. That's what I think the difference is. You can have a goal, just don't think the goal is going to make you inspired. No, enjoy the moment along the way. Then he goes on to say, Yoga Master Sri Swami Shivananda, who was Swami Satchidananda's teacher, Yoga Master Sri Swami Shivananda offered the only worthwhile goal I know of when he said that the goal of life is God realization. Now here's a goal I can live with. After all, this allows me to live in spirit every moment of my life while simultaneously thinking ahead to the next God-realized moment and the next. As the great Indian sage Ramana Maharshi once remarked, there is no goal to be reached. There is nothing to be attained. You are the self. You exist always. Now this is real inspiration. Let's get still. Thank you, Father, Mother God, for your inspiration this morning. Thank you for your guidance and direction. And we thank you for your strength, because we know it takes your strength to live independently of the good opinion of others. It takes your strength and faith in your presence for us to follow our inspiration. And we just are grateful that we don't have to do it alone. We're grateful that you are guiding and directing us each and every way. That as we put you first, we are fulfilling the purpose of our life. That as we follow your inspiration, we are fulfilling our purpose, whatever that looks like, that inspiration. Thank you, 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 thank you. And so it is. Amen.